Hello and welcome to our ongoing series of conversations with people that are making a difference with how it is that we live our digital lives. Extremely fortunate today to have two excellent panelists to explore the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning and its impact on defining the future of next generation internet protocol video streaming services. Joining us today is Gary Gutnick. He is the Chief Technology Officer with the Connected Home Division of Technicolor. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Eric Abrazizi, he is a Principal Analyst with ABI Research. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to chat as well.
Of course, excited to be here.
So, Gary, let me start with you. We've seen a tremendous amount of news, huge momentum on content around artificial intelligence and machine learning and its impact on new devices that are making their way into the connected home environment. Tell us a little bit about, in broad strokes, what you've seen occur and what Technicolor is doing and some of the key milestones that you've met in introducing new innovations into the marketplace.
Yeah, sure. So, I think first, as is a normal course in our industry, we continue to evolve and ship both our set-top box and our gateway and our broadband product lines. A lot of exciting rollouts this year. DOCSIS 3.1 is fully ramped up for us, shipping in very high volumes now. Looking a little bit towards the future, we have 11AX that's not too far around the corner. And definitely work is underway in the development labs on that. And we're very happy to have just passed our milestone of we've now shipped over 650 million devices, which is great. We're very proud of those numbers and very proud to be able to maintain the resulting large installed base that we have with our customer set in the market. As it relates to, roadmap and the topic of the day around the technologies of artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think that we're looking, it's all about use cases first and foremost, and I think we'll be talking a lot about that through the course of the discussion today. And the use cases is the application of that technology, but some of the trends, that are happening in the market, that again, I think will be recurring themes through the discussion will be, we have a lot of new privacy regulation and privacy concerns by consumers. So by doing some of the artificial intelligence and machine learning, kind of having those capabilities on the edge, on the kinds of devices that we make on the edge, can help out in some of those use cases as it relates to privacy, because some elements or some of those use cases can keep the information local into the home and not have to expose it to the cloud or to the outside environment.
It's a very interesting phenomenon how it is, how the very many different uses and potential applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning today. Eric, I guess from your perspective, what is the state of these technologies, of these emerging intelligent data analytics technologies? What are some of the applications that you're seeing, and how are you seeing it be practically applied by the network service provider community?
Sure. Yeah, I think everyone knows how important and beneficial AI and machine learning can be. In terms of action, it's still early days, but it's important that, end-to-end in the marketplace, there's knowledge and understanding of the potential impact, positive impact that this technology has. You're seeing it on the consumer front from some of the major consumer players for voice recognition improvement and for targeted content improvement, and that's going to continue. You also have enterprise applications for surveillance, being able to use image recognition for things like that. It's really wide-reaching, impressively so. When you start to narrow down a little more into the video space and what's going on there, still early days, but still a lot of knowledge and understanding of the potential. I would say advertising as part of a larger discussion around content targeting, understanding your audience, understanding their preferences, their habits. That's really important across the board for any sort of service, but with that information, you can then start to understand what advertisements are proper to serve them, what content recommendations are proper to serve them. And that's what we're seeing most of all today.
So Gary, as we introduce these new technologies, does it have any major impact on the mindset? I know we always focus on tool sets often when we talk about the application of new technologies, but in this case with artificial intelligence and machine learning, is there a new type of thinking that should be applied, a new strategic perspective that we should be taking as network service providers develop new services in general, but new IP, Internet Protocol video streaming services in particular?
Yeah, I think that again, coming back to use cases and talking about some of the ones that we're frequently talking about with our customers and for some of the rallying points for the application of the technology are, you could imagine, for example, a set-top box in a consumer's family room, living room, and that you could have a camera associated with that set-top box who's able to discern and determine who's in the room, who's on the couch, and therefore, enhance those content recommendations that Eric was mentioning before. And, just a few years ago, these kind of discussions were impractical because, the application of artificial intelligence in the cloud, is robust. It's there. It's available. But getting all that information is a large consumer bandwidth that could be economically infeasible to pay all the cloud costs associated with running that traffic back and forth and doing that crunching in the cloud. Not to mention that you could have some latency concerns. How long does it take, and so forth. So. And then even coming back to the privacy concerns that I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, so you could imagine the use case of enhanced content recommendation based on who's in the room, because what you might want to recommend to me sitting by myself on the couch in my family room might be different than if I'm together with my wife on the couch in the family room, and it's more then you need to go to what's best for us as a couple watching television, just opposed to me or just my wife separately. So that's the example of I think the kind of use case that is possible now with, again, localization on the edge of the application of artificial intelligence towards doing that. Other use cases that are related to that is for example, mood detection. So not only can you recognize who's in the room, who's on the couch, but what is the mood of the people in the room? Are we ready to see a comedy? Are we ready to see an action thriller? Are we ready to see a horror movie? And that's as you can imagine, that might be even more complex than just discerning who's in the room. But these are the things at least you might be able to dream about now. And we're also getting away from video and talking about voice for a second, and Eric mentioned voice as well. Voice command of what you're viewing on your television set. I mean, this is we have a lot of our customers, and there's a lot of offerings in the market that are doing that and more every day. We could also imagine now detecting the speaker ID as another form of determining, the remote is in whose hand by who's talking to the remote and making the request. Is it me? Is it my wife? Is it one of my kids? And again, by localizing that on the device, you perhaps can help consumers get around some of the privacy concerns about, well, is what my child is requesting, being seen by the world? Well, we service providers can package this and market it in a way that feels more consumer friendly from a privacy point of view.
Eric, same question to you. Are you seeing, you did mention and point out that we are in early days, but is this the sort of thing that is receiving strategic attention from, forward thinking or the strategic planners at NSPs? And does that change how they might approach the nature of their business in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time?
Right. Strategic attention, absolutely. Strategic action, again, a little less so. But I would add a caveat to that, considering the nascency of this, AI, ML as part of this public knowledge cloud that is getting a lot of attention. The amount of action we've seen so far is actually quite high compared to other parts of the market. So, and that does suggest a pretty aggressive growth for this market. And again, that's understandable when you consider the benefits. with those discussions that are ongoing, about some of these use cases that both Gary and I mentioned, yes, that does start factoring in to roadmaps. Absolutely. I think any NSP that's not discussing AI as part of a 5-year plan is missing a huge component of this market, and it's going to be an inaccurate discussion of what the market will look like. Depending on how impactful AI turns out to be, that varies for every company, obviously. But you're looking at something that can be nearly universally applicable in some part of the pipeline, whether it is delivery optimization, whether it's understanding the mood of the user or the mood of the room, how many users are watching. That's all really, really relevant and useful and actionable data that fed into a proper system can really start enhancing a product. So while it might not be practical to implement it today, it certainly will be in the next 2 years. And as everyone knows, the gears move slowly for a lot of large companies, so those discussions need to be ongoing as soon as possible.
Very interesting. So Gary, from a product design or service design perspective, you've mentioned several use cases. What are the implications, I guess, on two levels, on how it is that we design products to address the distribution and delivery requirements that Eric just mentioned and pointed to, as well as what is the CPE, the customer premises equipment itself? What needs to be included and embedded to become the new requirements of next generation CPE?
I think Eric alluded to it correctly that it's got to be in part of the roadmap conversation with all of our customer set, our network service provider customer set, and for sure it is because it's nascent days and things are still rolling out. But if you don't start the conversations, we have to be talking about that now in order for us to have effective deployments in the coming years. Because for us, I think from a Technicolor point of view, we're going to do a lot of it also through smart partnering. I mean, starting with our chipset and our key partners and suppliers on the chipset side. If we want to talk about embedding AI and machine learning in those chipsets, I mean, we have to have a smart conversation with them about how much is needed, how much is too much. These things don't come for free. There's costs associated with that. And that's why it comes back to use cases, so that as those SoCs, as those chipsets get baked, it's got the right level of capabilities to implement the use cases, not too much, not too little, not too much, so that we're writing the cost-benefit curve correctly. And that's some crystal ball work, and that's some smart guesstimation by us as an industry. But that's where it starts, because you've got long lead times on creation of those new kinds of components. And as well, I mean, we're talking to a lot of partner companies, both big and small, in the video space as well as in the broadband space. Technicolor is active on both fronts. We've got a very interesting partner relationship, starting with a smaller company that's bringing artificial intelligence to network security service on the broadband side of things. It's very unique, and I think very pushing the ball forward relative to the kind of network security offerings that are available to consumers today. And so as they roll that out, that's kind of exciting. And even some of our bigger software partners, we talk to them about how some of the bigger software ecosystems are going to evolve. Again, because that also, a lot of times, for example, we do a lot of work with Android TV in the video space, and so Google and Android TV are moving those specifications forward for their own roadmap to anticipate some of the use cases that might be able to be exploited through Android and Android TV, as an example.
Interesting. Eric, from your perspective, if we do sort of a current state, future state, do you see any broad distinctions on sort of the status quo of what the network and the CPE environment look like today and what it might look like in the next few years? Do you see a clear models shifting to address the emerging requirements?
I think there will be. From the consumer themselves, probably not too much changes. We have a lot of excitement going on around new Wi-Fi technologies and connectivity technologies with 5G coming up. Those tend to kind of roll out as is, and consumers are along for the ride. In the consumer's eyes, I think this really starts to manifest mostly as just better quality of experience. So if the CPE that's being used, allows better balancing within a home or an environment, that's great. It goes on behind the scenes. If the delivery optimization is happening, at the edge or higher, again, if it's improving quality of experience for a user, then that's a positive experience that's going to get relayed back to the provider, and it's positive all around. So I think in general, the consumer just wants that positive quality of experience, and ultimately, that's what the service provider is trying to offer as best they can. And that starts to generally happen more naturally as these types of technologies improve and progress.
What impact, Eric, if I stay with you, and I'd like to get Gary's feedback as well, does this have on the relationship that network service providers have with their technology partners and with the ecosystem in general? Do you see the move to a more intelligent, more intuitive, again, going to your point on the customer experience, does that change the nature of the relationship or of the type of discussion that's taking place between the technology community that is supporting the network service providers? Eric?
It does push more importance onto smart partnering. Gary mentioned that earlier. That's a really key part of this ongoing change in the market. There's a lot of new players out there that are focused entirely on AI/ML. They were a startup, but that's what they started doing 3 years ago, let's say, and they could have a really revolutionary product that could be exactly what someone needs. So having that market research and that understanding about who's at play here and where those smart partnerships are. It's great if you can build something out in-house, but obviously that's expensive and time-consuming for a lot of companies, and it becomes not really an option. So having those conversations with potential partners and partnering and building a roadmap and eventually a product that accentuates the positives of both partners or however many partners are involved. That's really the key to this, because an AI-focused player might not know enough to deliver video. You have multiple pieces of the puzzle going into that. So making those cooperate and leveraging, let's say, the AI/ML experience of one partner and the content delivery experience of another, that's where the best platforms come, and that's where the best quality of experience comes for a consumer.
So, Gary, interesting points made by Eric there. Does this affect the way the relationship that Technicolor has with its ecosystem in service to the network service provider? Are you seeing an evolution there, and what are you guys doing on that front?
Yeah, I think Eric described it very accurately and appropriately. It expands the world of companies and partners that we need to be talking to, because a lot of, as I think I kind of hinted to, a lot of we see these technologies are oftentimes already deployed in the cloud or in other industries and so forth, and so bringing those to consumers, bringing those to network service providers, bringing those to the services that we as consumers are used to, are wanting to evolve in our homes, forces a necessary the conversation to be wider, meaning more people at the table. And I think, Eric was kind of hinting at that, which is, more people at the tables, more voices. Not everybody has full context. So, then we and our customers and the people in our industry that are serving the network service providers who serve those end consumers in the home, we ultimately then have to wrestle that back down to what needs to be put in place to build that platform, to deploy that service, and to set up for the services that can come thereafter that we haven't yet envisioned, but can leverage some of the same technology. So I think it was well characterized, and on our part, it means concretely it means talking to more companies, and it doesn't even dictate the size or type. As I mentioned, I think earlier, I mean, some of the conversations are with very, very large companies, and some of them are with very small and nimble but exciting startups. And we're trying to work on our side for on the Technicolor side, so that when our customer, so that we can bring some of those ideas to our customers in a way that has more shape around it, so that we can have a more concrete discussion about really rolling out a new service.
I'm just going to add a little bit of specifics around that. So, we both mentioned that there's a lot more companies involved. You look at everything end to end. You have the delivery aspect, you have the content targeting aspect, then you have some of the more technical aspects of the content itself. So, speaking of video, you have high dynamic range, positional audio potentially, or surround sound audio, closed captioning, content regulation and monitoring for specific regions and things like that. There's opportunities in each of these that, are either being explored now or could be in the future. So HDR kind of rolling out continually, a lot of different formats, depending on how the format treats the content. You can have frame-by-frame analysis required, and you could start bringing in AI to expedite that and improve it. Same with positional audio and understanding rendering object-based audio versus not. AI plays in all of these components, potentially. So as you're having those partnership discussions, it might bring in new pieces of the market you didn't necessarily expect in, let's say, you're talking about the content delivery aspect of your platform. Well, you might need to start bringing in a standards body for HDR to discuss that, because now it's part of a piece of your platform that it wasn't previously, because AI starts to come involved. So it's an interesting spin on some of the existing technical aspects of content delivery that we haven't really discussed before.
Well, that's fascinating, because we're talking about, in essence, to improve the customer experience and to bring these new, hopefully revenue-generating services for network service providers. We're introducing a lot of complexity, new players, you both have suggested, large and small. So I guess it begs the question, how do these pieces fit together, and what role does that play in the way technology players, perhaps academic institutions that are doing some of the foundational work, and the standards bodies work together to make sure that we have the kind of interoperability and what I guess people refer to now as platform-based computing that allows you to be more or less future-proof or more malleable than perhaps the more rigid past was capable of absorbing. Gary, let me have you address that first, and I'd like to hear from Eric.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned. I mean, we definitely it's definitely an area that we're partnering in. Both for services and solutions that are in flight, as well as for even basic research. Technicolor still has a community of research and innovation researchers in an academic sense that are doing very forward-looking research in some of these areas. And some of them are very, even obviously by definition further out and so forth. But trying to solve some of those tricky questions. For example, at Technicolor, obviously we have a lot of relationship also with the content creators, and so when it comes to how will you practically, and Eric was mentioning sort of even scene by scene detection. So the mechanisms by which you could dream of doing, even some advanced advertising, such as taking advantage of, you're watching a movie that has a Coca-Cola bottle in the scene, and you want to do a Coke advertisement. Is that done in real time, no matter what the content is, by the device that's in the home? Is that done at the time of content curation? I mean, we're working with from our R&I labs across all those different use cases to see what could happen there. But I think for us, in large part, it's about picking those smart partners to help bring more shape, as I said before, to the video services that we can imagine coming along with the application of AI.
Yeah, and Eric, what just to add a wrinkle, and as I address the same question to you, what about harnessing this complexity and bringing it to market in an integrated and more or less interoperable manner from your perspective? Because it seems like a lot of different technologies that are governed by a lot of different standards need to come together in some kind of an integrated way to support this market. Are you seeing interesting collaborations there across the different players, standards bodies, and research institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of discussion ongoing right now. There's a few platforms that are really focused on kind of getting the capabilities of AI ML into hands of more developers, whether it's an open source platform or a compute system, things like that. We're seeing a little more activity from some major players and some smaller players as well that are really trying to just push the capabilities into more and more hands. And as part of that, you start to get a slightly easier, maybe not easier because it is very complex, but a better approach to getting AI into these different components. If you're working from a standardized platform, that is a better starting point than working with siloed versions of AI platforms. So that's a great first step. If you're really looking into pulling in numerous partners, numerous platform types, things like that, if AI is a key component that runs through all of that, if you can do it in-house and push it through, great. If not, there's more and more platforms on offer that allow something like that, whether it is open source or something similar. So that really that's a better starting point if you're really concerned about that complexity, and it is concerning. One other thing I would mention, I guess, is the process of automation in this. So, once these things are established, that's really when ROI starts being seen, because you're able not only to act on more data than you were in the past and do with that what you will, whether it is content targeting or whatnot. But then you're also able to begin automating because you have this data being processed, and you can build around that a way to automate whatever you're looking to do. So I mentioned closed captioning. There's potential automation already ongoing there. Using AI to enhance that is an option. Things like automated compliance marketing, again, that kind of comes into regulating bodies and working with them. If you could automate, let's say, regional differentiation of content, so pushing something to the Middle East, that piece of content looks different than pushing it to the United States. If you can automate that in some way, that saves substantially in a potential platform on that compliance marking and compliance editing. And that could skip entirely, that conversation, because that product you put out is, let's say, 90% of the way there for every region you push it to. So something like that as well can really help alleviate some of that complexity.
It's difficult to have a conversation about platforms, about AI, and about media without talking about the so-called GAFA companies and the influence that they're having in this arena. So I'm talking about Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc. Tell me a little bit, Gary, how is that affecting the way, what are you seeing from that category of player, and how does that influence the way you as CTO think about the marketplace?
Well, yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that all of those folks, all of those players already have today, applications and use cases around the AI technology. A lot of times starting from the cloud and, using those capabilities in the cloud to give you targeted advertising or what have you, depending on the platform. And of course, they're all pushing those capabilities and pushing those use cases forward. A lot of them, we're in especially for those players and for us as end consumers, we're very often driven in a mobile-first kind of way, meaning that what's happening, it's important to pay attention to what's happening in the mobile phone space with the capabilities and that are being, brought to those type of devices that then the platform players are able to take advantage of, because ultimately the realization of the new services and use cases are, again, how do you do your partitioning between cloud and edge? What do you do locally? What do you push centrally? What, latency and privacy and all those things come back into all those conversations again. And so we work, we naturally work with them in some of our product categories. I mentioned earlier that we have quite a large number of Android TV deployments, and as Technicolor, we're very proud to have the vast majority of those deployments in the network service provider space. We were an early mover in that space, and still, I think it's safe to say a trusted partner of Google and for their Android TV development. So as they look at evolving for those next generation requirements that they want to put in place that are going to be impactful for the devices that we make, we have to be on top of that and across that and talking to them ahead of time so that we're building the right things. And we're doing that. We've also, in the last couple of years, we've also done work with Amazon with their Greengrass technology that's again, compute at the edge and really the localization of some of their cloud technologies to devices on the edge and the use cases that you can do with that. These are important for us because they're large ecosystems. When we talk about voice today, between the Google Assistant and the Alexa voice services and the Amazon voice services with Alexa, these are the platforms that we as consumers know about, think about, use, and so a lot of our network service providers are determining, how to embrace some of those platforms into their own offerings as well.
So, Eric, I know that you have often very confidential discussions with every one of those companies, but what can you tell us generally about the impact of what we might call these original native, web native kinds of organizations? What are they having in this type of a discussion of artificial intelligence, platform computing, edge computing, and beyond? What are your sort of overall thoughts on what network service providers should be taking into account?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, there's what's public from these companies, there's what's private in my own conversations, and then there's also what they're just not telling anyone. So obviously I won't speculate too much on what's going on in that latter one. But Amazon, a huge part of this, they have, to an earlier point I made, they have Amazon SageMaker. So kind of an attempt to democratize this type of technology and bring it to more people. Google has been using some form of AI and algorithms for years, maybe most publicly facing with something like YouTube, and again, that's for content targeting and personalization. So they've been testing that out in different ways for years. Facebook and Apple doing some again content targeting, a little bit with image recognition and facial recognition for things like photo grouping and stuff like that. And that's what we see on the surface. Gary mentioned voice as well. That's a big part of this. I would say, in general, when you're working with this level of player, these monoliths of technology and cloud and internet, they have such an advantage in terms of starting point with data. I can't think of any company that even comes close to those four big guys in terms of the data they handle on a regular basis, the data going through their systems, and actionable data that they can use to improve their own products and improve user experience, whatever they want to do with it. That does bring in a privacy consideration we mentioned earlier in the call. But in terms of what's ongoing, we see some content recommendation, content targeting, things like that. That will continue. Google is working continually on YouTube and trying to improve that as it grows exponentially. You have YouTubers that are making very lucrative careers off of YouTube and can be positively or negatively impacted by an AI in the background, and that is judging what to put in trending as an example. So there's a lot of interesting discussions that weren't going on 5 years ago because the market was drastically different than it was, both in terms of who's using these platforms and then what these platforms are doing with that content. So there's so much power that these companies have with the data they have and the sway they have over their own platforms and even each other's platforms. So it's interesting to see how that develops over the next few years. They're all actively involved, probably more so in the background than what we see. but there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of potential for tapping into those gigantic banks of data. Partnering with these companies to get YouTube recommendations and to get YouTube analytics and data around users. That's incredibly important for advertisers, understanding what's going on there, and also for those pushing something like YouTube through their platform. It could be invaluable to have that sort of data. So that's really where, at least over the next couple of years, those discussions should take place. Past that, it's hard to say exactly what they're working on, but they're certainly working on it.
So let me stay with you, Eric, and as we sort of go into sort of closing thoughts and final comments, we've talked about a boatload of moving parts that are each quite large and complex and very dynamic. What is your best recommendation or your sort of top-line thoughts on how network service providers can prepare themselves for this next generation of artificial intelligence and machine learning-driven services and applications, especially in the context of IP video streaming services?
Well, I guess personally, I would throw out market research as it's my job to do so. But in general, having an understanding of what's going on in the market, avoiding surprises in terms of new technologies and new advancements, that's really important. No matter how you get that market data, just having that understanding of what's going on and what may go on in the future is really critical. You don't want to be blindsided by what's going on in AI right now, and then what you could have capitalized on, over the next 12 months, but you didn't quite know about. So that's really crucial. That leads into, again, the partnership discussion. If you have that market understanding, then you have a better starting point for partnering for potential acquisition should you be in that space. But basically, having that eye in the sky of the market allows you to really pinpoint what you need in your own platform, who might provide that in a partnership or acquisition, and then you can go from there. And then finally, that really just dictates your roadmap. If your roadmap doesn't include AI in some form, it's really foolish at this point. Even if it's as simple as content recommendation and targeted advertising, that's already happening. So that's an option. But going forward, we've discussed a few use cases that are potential opportunities, with 20 times more economical options than, say, your existing workforce through AI and ML, and, for metadata tagging and things like that. There's a lot of options out there. So really understanding from the top level and then working down exactly where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, adapting your roadmap to that, and having AI strung through as many places as possible really is the solution to capitalizing on AI ML and personalizing it for your platform and your target customer.
So Gary, same question to you with the added burden of, or opportunity, I should say, of explaining to us how Technicolor is positioning itself to support this rather interesting evolution.
Yeah, I think Eric characterized it well, and for us, it's definitely an antenna up type of situation. As we talk to our customers on a daily basis, on a worldwide basis, we've got to have our antennas up to be looking for the opportunities for what I would say for the recipe to look plausibly correct. First of all, we have some of our customers who are more naturally inclined towards leading the rollout of those kinds of either newer technologies or newer use cases. So within our customer set, we're typically going to those types of people for those leading discussions, and getting the recipe right is finding that right balance between maybe a very small service offering that is short-term and tactical, but could provide some learning about the application of AI and machine learning to our devices and to our ecosystem and to end consumers. It could be a very broad and big, dreamy platform that might take years to put together and to deploy, but depending on the seriousness of and the commitment of the partners involved, can be the right thing to do. And somewhere in the middle is the truth, meaning those recipes will be concocted correctly to where our customers and the partners that are put together for the rollout of some of those services, whether it's IP video streaming services or even some of the ones that we can talk about on the broadband side, both sides of our personality, that we're ready with the product and with the capabilities to be able to be part of that. And I mentioned earlier, working with our SoC partners, and also, some of the work that we've done with, compute at the edge, just the overall, the trend of the last years of having more and more compute capabilities in our devices is actually, normally leading ourselves to the toolbox being greater of the kind of things that we could do to where we can have intelligent conversations as we're putting together those plausible service platforms, again, about the architecture and the partitioning between what's done in the house, what's done in the cloud, what has to be relayed between the two, how do we take care of latency, how do we take care of privacy, those themes that have been running throughout this conversation. So from a Technicolor point of view, it's having those leading platforms ready, and we have those underway. It's having the conversations with the relevant customer sets and partners, which we try to do that, but the universe expands every day, as we mentioned earlier, just because of the sort of collision of technologies from different domains. And, ultimately, it's going to also, I think, lead into, very interesting, even, sort of additional vertical services being offered through the network service provider channel. You can imagine, like, insurance companies and healthcare and all the other verticals that we typically talk about that, might be able to participate riding on top of the platforms that would be rolled out by our customers, using AI and machine learning kind of technologies to also, do their jobs better. And, that's a little bit further out than tomorrow, but our conversations that are happening with our customers.
What a wonderful conversation. I can't thank you both, Eric and Gary, for taking the time to share your views on the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning on the evolving and emerging world for network service providers. Thank you so much for taking this moment to share your thoughts with us.
Thanks for having me.